During this last week, it rained so much. We got 7 inches of rain total. And in between all of the rain, I did manage to do a little bit outside, but I decided we were safer inside with all of the thunderstorms going on. And all that inside time helped me to slow down and think. And Cameron and I were having this conversation about some of our goals for this year and some of the things that we're going to do differently because of current events. And I decided this is probably something good to share with everyone. I keep having this feeling that we need to be more prepared for what is coming in the future. Specifically, we know there is a high probability of food shortages happening based on what we've heard thus far, and we're getting hints of that already. We also know that inflation, it's going to continue to go up.
We kind of held back on talking about this for a while because we just didn't want to incite fear and panic necessarily. This is just to inform and kind of just lay out the situation, really. I work for a large retailer, and even just this past week, we had some pretty intense meetings around the ocean freight rate increases. Costs are going up pretty dramatically by the ships and the carrier companies that haul those large containers of goods from China and other countries to America. What this means for us as consumers essentially is even more price increases. So we haven't hit the ceiling.
We wanted to touch on a few things that we are doing personally as a family to be able to hedge against inflation and also to prepare for the possibility of food shortages.
There you go, you said it. One thing that I've been working on is buying all of our animal feed ahead of time in bulk. With all these impending price increases, I felt like it was better for us to stock up a year's supply of the feed that we use to supplement our animals. And so in the barn right now, we have enough food to get them through at least this coming year.
In addition to making sure we have a year's supply of the feed, mainly grains for the animals, we're going to be growing some additional things like beets and
mulberry bushes.
More sunflower seeds for the chickens. All of those things we're adding on to be able to supplement what they already have. They're already on pasture, which is good and helpful. But we also are going to add some things on our end as well to supplement their feed and to be able to lower our costs of raising that animal.
Yeah. Another intent of that is also to reduce our dependency on outside sources that we don't have control over what they do. You know, I mean, they could have shortages soon enough, and then we're left high and dry without feed.
That's true.
And so.
The next thing that we are doing is we are growing more perennial plants and food crops. In years past, we have planted fruit trees, we planted nut trees, we planted berry crops, and we're just continually adding every single year. And this year is no exception. We are still adding more of those things. It's really nice to be able to have perennials because it's a lot less work involved. Even though there is some initial upfront investment, it really pays off in the long run.
Yeah.
I'm in the middle of reading this book called Restoration Agriculture, and the guy who wrote this book is really big on permaculture, and he's also really big on perennial plants for food, or just all perennial plants, basically. I don't agree with everything that he wrote in the book, but one thing that did really resonate with me is that a lot of his perennial crops he's growing to feed to the animals. One of those things being tree nuts, and then having the pigs come and eat the tree nuts underneath, and having this natural process happen where there's less grains and more perennial trees and things like that.
Another thing we're doing differently this year is we're planning on freeze drying a lot more foods than we have in the past. This is to help bridge the gap between our canned food storage that we put up that generally lasts a year, maybe 18 months, but we plan that to only last a year. whereas freeze-dried foods last 15, 20 years plus. And so that will help supplement and bridge that gap when, like, for instance, right now it's spring and our pantry is getting kind of empty because we're almost done with last year's supply, but we haven't quite started this year's supply. So it'll just kind of fill the holes there.
It also helps hedge against crop failures that may happen because I do have things that don't work in certain years and I don't get as much as I need. So if we freeze dry the foods a multiple year supply, then hopefully we'll have enough when something doesn't go right in the garden.
Yeah.
All of the things that we have been talking about so far are things that we do to save money against inflation, but also help with the food shortage problem. Yeah. Like I said, there are some initial costs if you haven't invested into, let's say, like a freeze dryer or invested into buying perennial crops. But in the long run, it saves you a lot of money. One thing that I was working on just yesterday is organizing my pantry. I wanted to organize my dry goods pantry specifically. My canning pantry always stays pretty organized, but the dry goods, I haven't done much with that yet. So dry goods being like grains and things that I can't buy, like olives and coconut milk and
vinegar, flours, rice.
Things for canning. I'm still working on organizing that, but it's actually really helping me see what we have versus what we need. And I'm gonna make a list inventory of what I think we need for the rest of the year, because I'd like to have a year supply of all of those types of things. And for us, mainly, we're always pretty good on greens, but I could use some improvement with things like just buying oils and peanut butter. I'm growing my own peanuts this year.
Oh yeah.
So that should help with that. Yeah. Once I get the pantry all organized, the way I usually do it is when I go to the store, I don't buy 10 things of olive oil all at once. I usually just, if I need one thing of olive oil, I'll go to the store and I'll buy 2 or sometimes 3 at one time. And that way you have one that you can use and the rest you store. And then when you run out of that one that you are using, you go back to the store and you buy 2 or 3 more. And repeat that same process, but you wanna make sure you're taking out of your pantry those older ones first. That's the way that it has worked really well for us without breaking the bank and keeping it within a budget, and just going slowly and deliberately in building up our food supply. Last week, I was visiting my sister, Amy, and she lives on the East Coast, far away. So it was really fun to visit her because she also has a homestead and we have a lot of the same interests. One of the things that she really does well that we haven't done so well at is she also makes sure she's stocked up on things like soaps and toiletries, paper towels, toilet paper,
Band-Aids.
Yeah, medicine. She grows a lot of herbs for medicines. So it has inspired me to do a little bit better in that regard. We do okay, but I just feel like it'll be important to have not only a year's supply of food with regards to food shortages, but also to make sure that we're covered in the case that for some reason we need to stay at home for a long period of time, the way we had to during the pandemic. Those are some things that we are doing to be prepared. On my website, on my blog, I wrote a list of 17 things that anybody can do or pick and choose from to be able to prepare for upcoming food shortages. So I will link that in the description below if you're interested in looking for things that you can do as well. Whether we are experiencing uncertainty or calamity or even peace, it is good to be prepared.
The more prepared we are, the less fear we have for these uncertainties. That's the gist of it.